Hello and welcome to 10 at 10. My name is Michael Ramage. I am the director of the Cyber Education Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and our local partner, Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. This week, we're going to deviate just a little bit from what we have been talking about over the last few weeks and dive into a new report that came out. But it is, rest assured, it's still cyber related. It is still cybersecurity, and it is still about trying to find ways to keep you and your organization safe in cyberspace. So we will dig in that today. Before we dive into it, I want to say on the surface, it can look really complicated. It can look really technical, which it is. Don't make no mistake, it is very technical. But even if you're not a technical expert, I think there's some value that you can have from examining this report. If you're novice, if you're a small business owner and not the most technical of people, still take a look at this report, and I'll point out some ways that they can be that I at least think that this report can be helpful. So first of all, let me back up. A few months ago, maybe even 6 months ago, we talked about the MITRE attack framework. The MITRE attack framework highlights the ways that an adversary goes through a process of techniques to attack your organization. So if an adversary is looking at your organization, then they're probably going to start with reconnaissance. They're going to go through some resource development, perhaps they're going to have some initial access. They're going to execute some tool, some technique. They're going to have, hopefully from their perspective, not yours, have some persistence. They're going to do privilege escalation. They're going to go through these things where ultimately they get perhaps command and control and exfiltrate data, and it's going to have some impact on your organization. That is all laid out in this attack framework. And honestly, if you've never looked at this attack framework, I highly recommend it. Again, no matter how technical you are or not, this really lays out the whole ecosystem of that threat an adversary framework. It's really a good thing to take a look at. And this has been around for a while. MITRE is a nonprofit organization, does a lot of work in cybersecurity, does a lot of work for the government. We actually have an alumni that does some really cool stuff for MITRE. I highly recommend that you take a look at this. You can Google MITRE attack framework. You'll find it. Since they are a nonprofit, they release a lot of information that can be really helpful to folks. And one of those things that recently was released through their Center for Threat, through MITRE and the Center for Threat Informed Defense, is a report. It's entitled Sightings Ecosystem. It's a data-driven analysis of that attack in the wild, of that attack framework in the wild. And essentially what they've done is they looked at all the sightings, the attack sightings over the last couple years. It's from April of 2019 until July of 2021, and just said, hey, what are we seeing? They found over 6 million sightings. They normalized the data down so that there's 1.1 million normalized sightings. They found 184 different techniques in the observations. So they have a good amount of data to look at and try to figure out what is it that we have out there, what can we look at, what can we do, and most importantly, can we learn? So I wanted to share a few highlights on that. You can see the link to this report there on the screen. We'll have it on the last slide as well. You can Google MITRE sightings ecosystem report, and you're going to find it. It's some really good information, and I recommend that you take a look at it. Summary: there are two primary things that they looked at. They looked at what are the most popular techniques that were used, and they listed the top 15, and we'll highlight that in just a second. Then they also looked at, and this is probably what's even more important for you, is what are those controls that we could use to stop these techniques from being effective? What are the defensive controls? And they mapped it back to the NIST 800-53 document, which is a standard document that we've talked about in the past. But what is it that you can do to stop it? And actually breaking down those techniques a little bit more, schedule task, job task, made up 24.1% of the observed techniques that out of that million normalized data. 24% of it, nearly 1 in 4 times when they saw something, they saw that schedule tasking aspect. The second most popular was the command and scripting interpreter at 15.7%, hijack execution flow at 12.6%, proxy at 10%, masquerading at 7.98%, and it goes down from there. But the top two, schedule task, job, and command and scripting interpreter. And we're going to talk about those for just a second this week. And I want to explain a couple things as we do that. So this was the summary slide, the summary page of the report. If you go a little bit further on the left-hand side, or at least as I look at it on the left-hand side of the screen, what you're seeing is a page from the report. So for all 15 items that they have, first of all, they map it back to the attack framework that we talked about first. But on that scheduled task, it breaks it down even into subcategories of that technique. So 85% of that technique was on scheduled task. So that was the specific subcategory that it was connecting back to. They break it down from there. I'm not going to go through all that because that is not what I want you to take away, unless you're real techie and you really want to dig into the data, and then I'd recommend you do that. But if you want to learn more, first of all, about that schedule task job technique, if you click the link in the report, you can see it here, T1053, it will take you to the page over here to the side. And in that page, it's going to give you some additional information on it. This is, to be clear, this is a sub page of that attack framework. It's going to talk about it. It's going to talk about some of the procedures and examples. It's going to give you some additional information. If you want to dig into it, what it means, how it works, I highly recommend you do that. There's some really good information in it. If you're not a technical person, then perhaps the bottom of the page of the report is going to be more important for you. And it has prevention items on it. And in particular, if you look at it, and this is just the bottom of that page blown up a little bit so you can see it a little bit easier, it lists 14 security controls that are known to mitigate adversary use of that scheduled task. So to go back, of those people that are using the scheduled task as the avenue, as the technique to compromise your system, here are some things that you can do to protect yourself. This is what you can do: account management, access enforcement, separation of duties, least privilege. It goes on from there. But let me just highlight, those are not super expensive devices, appliances that you have to purchase. They could be, depending on how you wanted to implement it, but they're more management strategies. For example, access management or least privilege. You know, as a small business, sometimes it's really easy to just give everybody admin access. We don't want to deal with it. We don't have time to manage users. We don't want to do all that. So let's just give everybody admin access. Well, what that does is it flies in the face of some of these control methods, some of these ways that we can stop and reduce the chance of compromise, reduce the effectiveness of that technique, because we're taking the easy way out. So if you want to look at some of the most popular techniques that adversaries are using, at least that had been observed, Take a look at this report. Then, if you want to look at some of the known security controls to protect your organization, you can take a look at those as well. Now, I don't I don't expect you to become an expert to read this report, become an expert on any of these items. You're not going to. But what I think it really can do for you is to raise awareness of some of these items. Are you doing what is necessary to protect your business? And unfortunately, for so many, the answer is no. The next one is the same type of setup. So this was this number two item. This was the command and scripting interpreter. I'm not going to go through it, um, but at the top there's an overview of it. At the bottom there are controls, and if you look at those controls, those are there's 16 controls here, but many of them overlap to what we just saw on the previous one. It's a theme over and over and over again. So what I'd like for you to do is take a look at it. If you have questions, let me know. But in particular, if you're an organization that's trying to get your footing in cyberspace, trying to figure out how can I protect my business better and better, take a look at this and look at those prevention techniques. If you're not doing those, then I would highly recommend that you consider those. Perhaps we'll look at some of those over in the coming weeks and months, but some of those are very simple principles, but also make your organization much more secure, but also can make it more of a challenge to manage. But anyway, it's good information, and not only is it good information and things that we have talked about on here, but it's based on real data that we're seeing in the wild, that MITRE is seeing in the wild. So I'd highly encourage you to take a look at it. Let me know if you have questions. If something comes up and you want to make sure that I talk about it in a future 10 at 10, then share that with me, and I will try to cover that back here on 10 at 10. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope to see you back here on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.